when they give them tender, loving care. For more info, you can reach them at 909-528-9759. That's 909-528-9759 for Tender Hearts TLC.
Listen to KCAA Loma Linda for less confrontation and more information.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. I am Attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. This week, like we do every week, we'll be talking about critical, important legal issues affecting our community. And today, actually, we're going to have a panel discussion regarding the impact of fatherhood on the criminal justice system. So I guess, I'm going to start out talking about this subject, I guess, from a personal perspective, being someone who grew up in a single-parent household. You know, actually, last week we're going to actually discuss this issue. However, we had made a decision actually to put it off for a week for a couple of different issues. But I believe one of the issues is that I felt that to do the segment during Father's Day, may or may not have been appropriate, just simply because I didn't want to be too critical of fathers or critical of, someone's efforts in trying to be a father. So I felt that we would wait another week actually to talk about it. However, and again, going back to the issue of the fact that I had actually grew up in a single parent household. However, I recall something that happened to me probably, maybe it's been about 6 months ago, when I was actually in juvenile court and I was speaking with a lady. I was representing a young man on another case. However, when I walked into the courtroom, I actually had spoken with a lady who was out in the outside the courtroom, and she was crying and she was upset, and she began to start telling me some issues about what she was having with her son and the fact that he was going through so many difficulties because he was, being raised in a single parent home. The father wasn't in the child's life, no father figure, that sort of thing, and how difficult it was. And I felt really sorry for her. But when I went into the courtroom, we were actually in the judge's chambers, and we were talking about some cases. And the attorney that was representing the kid actually was talking about the fact that they were going to try him as an adult. Mm-hmm. And I began to start conversing with him and telling them that basically, I grew up in a single family home. However, I had grandparents around, and I was raised in central Tennessee in a place called Shelbyville, Tennessee. And the street that I was raised on, actually, it was predominantly, well, not predominantly, it was all African American. And in every home on that street, there was a man taking care of his family. Mm-hmm. And those men was my grandfather, A.D. Reynolds, my great uncle, Collins Reese. You had Tommy Lee Brame. You had, and I'm just naming the men because I think they should be, I just want to recognize them. Mm-hmm. You had John Flax. You had William McChristian. You had Clay Smith. You had Russell Shorty McDonald. You had all these men that were in the homes taking care of their families. Mm-hmm. And although I did not have grew up in a family necessarily where my father was not there, but the fact that there was men around me that were in homes taking care of their children mm-hmm. was obviously had a significant influence on me. And so I think that and I look back to that time period and understanding how important it was for men to be in the household. And I was looking at some statistics where it said in 1960 there was 22% of black children were raised in a single parent family. And now 50 years later, they suggest that 70% of black children are raised in single parent families. Mm. So you're talking about almost it's almost tripled of the amount of single parent households that are being raised by that single parent households raising children in our communities. I mean, and that's alarming and that's staggering. And also some of the other statistics that you see with regards to that, it says that 63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. That's according to the U.S. Department of Health, which is five times the average. It says 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 85% of all children who show behavior disorders are from fatherless homes. They suggest that 80% of rapists with anger problems come from fatherless homes. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. That's the effect on some of the social issues. In education, it says that children with fathers who are involved are 40% less likely to repeat a grade. Children with fathers who are involved are 70% less likely to drop out of school. Children with fathers who are involved are more likely to get A's in school. Children with fathers who are involved are more likely to enjoy school and engage in extracurricular activities. And it says 75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes, which is 10 times the average. So I mean, there's statistics after statistics that basically show that growing up in a home without a father has a significant impact on social and economic issues that also reflect on the matters that are relevant to crime, right? Mm-hmm. It says that nearly 25 million children have an absentee father, and the single most important cause of poverty is fatherless, having fathers in the home. And it says that also it's the highest rate of incarceration in the United States are those who do not have that grew up in fatherless homes. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's clearly a specific, a direct connection between not having fathers in the home and criminal conduct. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple of things. I mean, number one is I think that in our community, Bilal, without question, the first issue is clearly that has a significant impact on what's going on in our community. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm really reluctant, and I'm a Southern gentleman, so I really don't like stepping on people's toes. Mm-hmm. However, when it comes to men not taking care of their children, I'm hard on men like that. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. Really, really important. And I think in our communities, that's one of the things that we have to focus on is men being in the homes and men taking care of their children. Mm-hmm. Really, really important, which I do know that has a significant impact, not only the issue of raising men, but the issue of raising women as well. Mm-hmm. I think that the father figure is important just as much as the mother is important. Mm-hmm. The father is just as important because there's a role to be played there. Mm-hmm. And we see that a lot of young men, as we were discussing last week, when we talked about the issues about the entertainment industry and some of the behaviors patterns that we're seeing with young men, also is a result of the fact that somebody else is going to raise your children. Mm-hmm. As a young man, you're looking for someone to teach you how to be a man. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have someone in the home that you can look to teach you how to be a man, then what happens is that you begin to start looking at your at your friends. You begin to start looking at television. Mm-hmm. You begin to start looking at, that's why in gangs. Mm-hmm. You're looking for somebody that's going to help you understand how to be a man and it's not a knock against women, mm-hmm. but, let's just be real. You need a man to help you, guide you, and show you how to deal with men. And there's things that little boys don't want to talk about with their moms. Exactly. You know what I mean? So it's important that you have that someone there that you can talk to. There's certain problems, certain things that they can even relate to that maybe, whether I'm not saying that a woman could, because I think that my mother did a great job raising me as a single parent, but I can't dismiss the fact that there were men directly around me that had a significant impact on me and showing me, mm-hmm. How to do that. So, and just hold that thought, and we're going to come back to that. And then Rosa, on the other hand, the other competing thing about the reason why you do have the argument with regards to what's going on in the community is that there's been a concerted effort through mass incarceration to make sure that the family structure is not held intact. I mean, a lot of that has been, I knew that I was talking about earlier, me and Bilal were talking about the issue of there's this thing called the Case for National Action, and this was something that was written by Daniel Moynihan. And for those of you who do not know who Daniel Moynihan was, is that he used to be the Assistant Secretary of Labor, and basically under the President Lyndon B. Johnson's, what he had termed, I think, his war to end poverty, there was a report that he had written in 1965, and he talked about the fact that there's a direct correlation between the issues in the black family being that the issues of the high rate of families headed by single mothers was a result of slavery, Jim Crow, and now, of course, this was in 1965, and I don't know if anybody ever read the book called The New Jim Crow, that was about mass incarceration. And I would say that if he wrote this piece today, the report today, I believe that would also be part of it. And there are many of those who say that there is actually a concerted effort on the government to try to make sure that the black family doesn't stay intact by the mass incarceration, by the policies that they have, whether it's in our law enforcement, our sentencing policies, the way in which we deal with things in the criminal justice system, the blatant issues with regards to jury selections, the blatant issues with regards to sentencing disparities, the blatant issues with regards to prosecutorial, the way in which they select to prosecute individuals, or selective prosecution, so to speak. All these things, and the disparities between the types of crimes that are directly linked to things within the inner city and the things that are linked outside our communities. And these things have caused mass incarceration, primarily disproportionately for African American men, which in turn has a specific impact on when you have such a mass number of African American men in prison, then obviously that's going to create a void within the community of fathers not being there. And some say that that's not by design. I mean, that's not by accident, that's by design. So I guess the first thing we'll talk about is let's begin by talking about the whole issue of the absence. Outside of the whole discussion, we'll start outside of the discussion of how it affects the criminal justice system. I mean, in other words, how they go and actually do things to make sure that they can destroy the family. But let's just begin by just talking about the impact of the father in the community on young men.
I think it has a great impact. One of the things that I read a lot of these statistics years ago, but I don't think that at the time that I read them that they were more drastic than what I see now. I mean, looking at them now, I looked at them years ago, but look at them now, these numbers are very high. And you can tell by these numbers that this is the root cause of a lot of the issues that we're having inside of society. When I read them, one of the things that, I made a conscious decision in my head that, when I came home from prison, I said, look, I'll be damned if any of my children is going to call someone else dead. I'm going to be there for them, and that's why I'm so determined to be around my children, to give them that direction or give them guidance. And I think that in our community today, years ago you had it where, you had positive males around you that were able to help help you and give you that guidance, when Pops wasn't there. However, there's a lot of kids that don't have that. And so, like you say, they're left to emulate what they see in other males. And it's not necessarily positive males that are around them. Whether it be rat neck down the street, whether it be somebody that they see on TV, and they start emulate them because they searching for that identity. And this is not a knock on single parents in terms of mothers, because a lot of mothers do all they can do, but they can't do everything when they're raising a child, because when the child is left without that mother and father in home, they grow up unbalanced, period. They grow up lacking something. And so back in the days when they said it took a village to raise a child and stuff like that, because other males would step in when they didn't see a father around. You don't have that nowadays. Our elders are scared of our youth.
Right.
Our elders is clearly scared of our youth today, so they don't step in, because they're afraid if they say something to one of the youth is gonna go off. And I think it's that these statistics, man, it's sad to see some of these statistics, because you can actually read them, and then you can actually see where it's having this effect upon our community and stuff like that, in terms of the incarceration rate, in terms of the dropout rate or drop out of school rate. You see it, But I think also what has a tendency to happen is that when a lot of youth look at all of these statistics and they begin to say, well, okay, if this be the case, then how am I going to succeed? Statistics tell me that I'm not going to succeed.
Exactly.
And they begin to allow this to have this effect upon their subconscious mind, to lead them down a direction, feel like there's no hope, when there is hope. I mean, we know that there's hope, but when they see these negative images of individuals that look like them and statistics, they begin to believe that there's no hope. And that's just another thing that's actually stunting the growth of young men and young women that's growing up in the communities.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I feel like a lot of times, as a millennial myself, I feel like my dad has been there for me, to provide for our family. Yet, at times, our parents kind of get caught up in that environment of just bringing the bacon home, in a way, of making sure that their children are fed and dressed. And at times they kind of lack that connection with their children, because they're so caught up in working, and because the system requires that they go out there and that they take every second that they can to be able to afford things for their household, and even to be able, and it's not even luxury, but to be able to feed their families. And I feel like for all of those of you learning, all of those of you hearing us on the lines, we would like to hear from you. What is your input on this issue of fatherless homes and absent fathers? And we would like for you to call the number 909-792-5222 and to get involved and to really partake in this conversation, because it's really important.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's and that's such a huge issue with regards to not having fathers in the home, and poverty is kind of one of the things that I'm not really feeling the whole. Well, obviously, poverty is has fatherless homes obviously have a higher rate of poverty, but I'm not necessarily of the belief when the family is intact. I think regardless of the economic condition of the family, I think it still can be very healthy and very productive, even if you grow up in a family that's, maybe on the lower economic scale as far as families are concerned. Even if you're in, I don't think that automatically translates into someone who is going to commit criminal acts versus the fact that the father not being there at all. It's about the behavior and it's about the discipline oftentimes. And then we fall into this other thing about the issue of whether there is a concerted effort to try to ensure that the family does not stay intact. Now, we know that basically there has always been a policy, when we talk about formal and informal policies, but there's always been a policy within our government from the very beginning that there was concerted efforts to break up the home, whether it, especially during slavery days, where you would have, clearly families that were separated. Exactly. And then you had the whole idea during the Jim Crow era, or the convict lease system. All during this eras, you've seen different things that were being utilized by the government to make sure that certain individuals were not treated the same way that other individuals were being treated. And and there's many of individuals that don't like to get on that subject. I mean, it becomes where it's a blame game. So in other words, when you begin to start talking about the crisis and what's going on, then everyone says, well, no, those things don't really exist. That happened before. If you do the right thing, if you doing what you're supposed to, you're not going to be subject to the criminal justice system. That's basically something that that's kind of self-inflicted, and nobody really wants to hear that. You're just playing the race card. And so I do believe clearly that what's happening is, whether it's a concerted effort or not, I can tell you that there is issues with the policies, and the policies are definitely affecting different people in different ways. And I do know that basically the whole issue about the way that they are implementing the criminal justice system has definitely resulted in mass incarceration of African Americans, and it's not because African Americans choose to participate more in criminal conduct than other individuals. I mean, there is this whole idea of, this is why it becomes, I mean, for me personally, I've always been a believer of, again, I understood at a very young age that there are going to be things that were thrown in my way, and that basically I had to figure out ways to overcome regardless of whatever my obstacles were. But that's me. In other words, that's just the way that, fortunately, I was raised, and not everybody is going to be raised that way. I understood that I could not just be a normal person. And that's a lot to put on an individual, to let them, to say, hey, look, you know what, you're going to have to be abnormal. You're not going to be able to live a normal life, because you're going to be tested, and you have to do twice as much to be as just to get the same thing. I was up for the challenge, right? But I don't think it's fair, but I was up for the challenge. And is it fair to make sure that you're going to require an entire race of people to actually have to be twice as good to get the same thing, right? And it's not. It's it clearly it's a huge task to ask someone to have to deal with something like that. And I think that what happens is that clearly we have to understand that it's a crisis, and the way that you deal with crisis is, the question that you have to ask is that when you recognize that you have a group of citizens that clearly are being treated differently than everybody else, does it become their problem, or would you see it as America's problem? It's a crisis in America. So how often have we referred to the crisis of the black family as a crisis of the American family? If you approached it from the crisis from the American family, then maybe there would be a different way of approaching it, and understanding that there are issues and there are ills in our communities that really need to be addressed in order for us to figure out ways to move forward. But there's something that my grandfather told me when I was a boy. He told me, fish swim and ducks quack. Meaning that sometimes, that you're not going to change these people, because sometimes that's just the way they do it. So I think, do we spend our time and effort trying to convince people of what's going on, and that there has to be something that we have to do as a nation to address this crisis? Right? Or do we spend our time and effort trying to speak directly to the community and making them understand, this is a crisis, this is what we're dealing with, we have to stop depending on other individuals to correct problems that are going on in our communities, and focus our efforts on dealing with this issue ourselves?
I think that it is an effort to disassemble the family, and I think that's been going on, like you say, since slavery. I believe that it's become so common to where that if we do address the community with the issues, it's like they feel that there's no hope. Like I say, there has been so many roadblocks that's been placed in front of us in order to, whether it be just to get a job, all the negative imageries that individuals see to believe that they have no hope whatsoever. And I think that's one of the things that keep us so separated, because we don't have the belief that we can do better or we can be better. And going back to the family, going back to slavery, how it's separated. If you get the individuals that's basically the backbone of the family, which we know is the male. You take the male away from the home, then everything else falls apart. They say you take the head and the body falls. And I think by the man being the head of the household, you take that head of the household and you lock him up. Or you put those roadblocks in front of him where he can't get any proper education, he can't get any viable jobs or job skills to make him a productive individual. Then what happens? It's left to the single parent, And so I think that by locking up the male and attacking the male, I think this is what makes their family just go away, and it's no family at all. I mean, you look at our society now, and the absence of the father is great, and we're looking at the statistics, and it's individuals that's going inside a prison and coming out, and then they have to deal with the child's mother, and then that's another issue right there. The conflict between the child mother, trying to bridge a gap between the mother and the father, who has been absent away from the home for so many amount of years. The mother is filing child support, and here it is, the male he ain't got no job to even pay the child support. So now he got all of this stuff that's stacked up against him for all of these amount of years that he's been absent and not being able to pay child support. And then the state come in and say, well, you haven't paid child support. It's all different variables, man, that keeping this family apart. And it's tearing us apart further and further apart.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like if we address the crisis of the black family as an American problem, it's something that is very essential, because we humanize the suffering of the black family. Because by not addressing it as an American problem, we're automatically just not saying that blacks are humans, that their suffering is valid. And I feel like this is an American problem because it not only involves blacks inside domestically being oppressed, but we also talk about America in the international community. And it not only deals with blacks, but it also deals with other minority communities. We just saw this week, the camps that they had these kids in, Latino kids in, and they're separating their families at the border. That in itself is oppression. That in itself is taking these kids away from their parents, much like, having a fatherless home in a way, And I feel like it's an American problem because internationally in the global sphere, what do we do with Syrian refugees? What are we doing with people that are coming in with asylum, that they are actually in the international community? They have inalienable rights to come into this country and ask for asylum. It's domestic, it's international, and I feel like we need to really address it as an American issue because it is an American problem.
Well, I think that what happens is there's kind of a little bit of a parallel between what we're seeing going on at the borders, and I want to actually that's the next week's topic, but but there is kind of a parallel, and the parallel is that we sometimes I think that and again, I'm not going to go too far in it, but I believe that our international we create policies, and by creating or by indulging in like our international policy, like part of the history of our international policy has involved us engaging in dealing with these other nations, getting involved in other people's business, destabilizing governments, knocking off rulers and, putting our puppet governments in and then leaving. And now you've created a monster. And then now that you've created this monster. Many of these, because we were all over Latin America. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, we, you know, all the stuff that we were doing from all of these countries, Nicaragua, all these places, we were involved in their politics. And now you can't say, okay, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to deal with your, you know, destabilize your government or put in a puppet government. And now I've created this monster, and now your people want to come over here. And it's like, you people stay over here. This is America, right? So we have to understand. I mean, if you're going to start messing with people internationally and getting involved in international business, then you can't, on the other hand, be selective at when you're getting involved in international business, right? So now that these individuals are coming over here, part of the reason why they're coming over here is because of something that you've done. You see what I mean? So that's the same thing with our policies in our government here in America. In our early policies of the way that we've done with the you know, the slavery, the convict lease system, the Jim Crowism, all this stuff that we were involved in. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend 400 years of just, you know, some of the, you know, the worst atrocities against human beings, and now I'm going to take my hands off and say, you know, now it's time for you to pick yourself up and do things the way, you know, it's your fault, right?
Exactly.
And it's not the fact that you're saying, well, I'm not going to take responsibility for your own actions, but you can take responsibility for your actions. You see, it's all relative. It's hypocrisy. You know what I'm saying? You can't say, well, if your nation or an individual has done something that is unjust or illegal, and say, you know, you hold your feet to the fire because you've done something, then it goes both ways. You see what I mean? And what you've done is you have basically, and when I say you, I'm talking about the policies of the country, have actually have done some terrible, terrible things. You know, some things that basically only a diabolical person would do. You know, that if you did that in any other country, right, then you would be called a inhumane dictatorship.
Exactly.
Right? So what I'm saying is that you have to have some sort of, you know, just because it's not your reality doesn't mean it's somebody else. It's not somebody else's reality. You see what I mean? So it's like, just because you're not dealing with it doesn't mean that somebody else is not dealing with it. And that's kind of the way that, unfortunately, we deal with our policies, and those policies have created suffering. And now that you've created this suffering, you know, you don't want to be held responsible for it. So you do have to take responsibility for the things that you're doing. You've created some of this, and you have to say, look, I need to get involved in it. They're saying, well, you know, some of the policies that they've said that they've created to repair it they don't even know what they're even talking about. You know, I've heard people say, well, we had affirmative action. So since we have affirmative action, that basically solved the problem. You know what I mean? But the reality of it is that affirmative action didn't really benefit African Americans that much. There are other individuals that actually benefited more from affirmative action than African Americans did. You know what I mean? Just the numbers are actually, you know, and some of the individuals who have benefited from the affirmative action are some of the biggest critics of what's happening in Black America. You see what I mean? So I mean, there's a lot of hypocrisy that is that we're dealing with. And I think, and until my personal opinion, I'm not really confident that we're really going to be addressing, or that America at some point in time going to start considering what's going on with Black America an American problem. I'm not really I just don't see it happening. That's just the way that I am. I'm not really.
Yeah, and I don't think you would see it no time soon, because here's the thing, you know, as you was talking, I was thinking about, you know, how you saying whether or not they're going to address it as an American issue, or whether we just going to address it, you know, as an African American issue inside the community. And I think if you address it on one phase, okay, you have to create all these bills in order to, because, okay, look at the Constitution, okay? Wasn't included in it, so we have to come up with all these different bills in order to get our rights as we say, the civil rights, right? And I think that was one of the big arguments back when we had Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And, you know, Malcolm X said, no, we need to deal with it on a human rights level. Because if you deal with it on a human rights level, that means your civil rights is automatic. You don't have to go get if you respect it and you're giving your rights on a human level, and then you don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to fight for civil rights because you're being respected as a human being. Those rights are automatically given to you, you know? And so I think because it's not been addressed on that level, we're going to continue to we got to create this bill in order for us, like the affirmative action, so forth and so on. And so we have to address it on that, that human rights platform in order for us to, and that's the American platform. You know, because if we address it on a, you know, African American platform, we got to, like you say, we got to create these bills. We got to come up, we have to amend something, or we got to come up with something, you know? So, yeah.
I mean, we can't, I mean, you know, the problem is that basically, you know, legislation is slow, you know, trying to, you know, we can't we can't talk about more than one thing at the same time. You know, everything is, I mean, it's, you know, it should be it's an urgent issue. It should be dealt with as an urgent issue, and the whole idea, the fact that the mass incarceration rate in our country is completely ridiculous. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, there's we're failing in a way that, to be quite honest with you, you know, this is kind of the way I see what's happening in. You know, not only just the black family, but really what's going on, period, is that we're creating, what I'm fearful of is that we're creating something that's going to destroy not just black America, but America in general. And I think that they don't really understand what they're doing. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, this is what you're doing, is you're thinking that basically you're trying to preserve something, and then you're going to go so far that eventually you're not going to be able to undo what you've already done. And these people, they really don't understand that. You know what I mean? I mean, they really don't. They're not. It's almost like you really don't get it. You're thinking that basically this whole conservative, you know, ideology, that the liberals are killing America, and that we're doing all these types of things, you know, that the liberals are doing these types. I mean, this is all just basically superficial things. You know, I understand that, and they're confused. People are really confused, and I think that we train people to be confused based upon, you know, the information that we're giving them. And there's agenda behind all the information that they're disseminating to all these people, but these people aren't smart enough to really understand it. So what they do is they spend all day looking at really, you know, trivial issues about what this person said, what this person's talking about. You know, they're talking about, well, you know, these people are coming to the borders, and when they come to the borders, we're splitting up the families. That's what the law does not tell you to split. I was looking on Facebook the other day. Some guy put some sort of U.S. code about splitting up the family, but it was talking about unaccompanied minors, right? These people aren't unaccompanied. There's no rhyme or reason why you should be doing things like that. And so what happens is that basically you're going to start looking at our society the same way that some of these, you know, dictators have been treating their citizens, have been treating other individuals who are trying to come to the country. You're just mistreating people, and eventually, if you keep mistreating people and you're given opportunities to make amends for all these things, then eventually it's going to. We just took a step back. We're not progressing. We're going back. And you know, the thing about it is that we were trying, and we'll talk. I don't want to get caught up on the immigration subject, but you know, Barack Obama was doing things to try to address the issue. He tried to do DACA, and they would not. He couldn't get it passed. So that's why he can't. That's why it was an executive order. He tried to do DAPA. They didn't do it. They actually went to federal court and stopped him from doing DAPA, which was for parents. And contrary to popular belief, it wasn't really that easy to get DACA or DAPA, because you couldn't have a felony, or you could not have a serious misdemeanor. And in fact, if you even had a DUI, you couldn't get a DACA. You see what I mean? So and you had to be in the country for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
It was a pathway to citizenship, is what he was trying to do, and they cut him off. And now they get in office, and then now you're in. This is the hypocrisy. Now that you're in office, then you're saying, well, no other administration tried to do anything about immigrations. But at the same time, every time he tried to do something to progress with it, with immigration, they tried to cut him off. So, I mean, again, going back to the whole issue, I mean, we're talking about two things. What, as far as in the community is concerned, and what people have to understand in the community is that it is important for men to start understanding that they do have a responsibility to take care of their children.
Yeah.
And you can't
Most
put
definitely.
that, and you can't put that on anybody else.
Exactly.
You do have to take care of your children, and you do have, and I do know that it's hard. It's hard when there's actually this efforts from the very beginning in order to prevent or to avoid the criminal justice system, because they do target African Americans in all aspects.
Yeah.
As far as the justice system is concerned, it is not something that's being made up. It's actually a reality.
Exactly.
But I mean, when you're going through that, so you're expected to be, not ever get in any kind of trouble. You almost have to be a perfect individual to avoid the criminal justice system. And the reality of it is that, I grew up in a community that was not predominantly African American. I went to a high school that was not predominantly African American. And I know that people and everything that we did, they did the same thing, right?
Yeah.
They just happened to avoid it. Whether you look at Greek life on campuses.
Yeah.
Look at what they do on campuses, the marijuana that they smoke on campus, the toga parties, the getting drunk. All these individuals that are sitting in these positions of power did the same thing. They just didn't happen to get caught. And because they were in places where it wasn't, so we're held to a higher standard. You're getting stopped more, so you're more likely to get caught.
Exactly.
And I would say that if you how many times the campus police come in and arrest people or stop people or do things for people who are doing things that are illegal, and they get away with it.
Exactly.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
The same thing with campus rapes. On-campus rapes is a huge number of on-campus rapes that go underreported,
Exactly.
right, or unreported.
Yeah.
And so, what you're doing is you're having people that are holding people to a standard that other people are not being held to. And I know that to be the fact in all aspects of life, that you're going to be scrutinized in a way that other people are not going to be scrutinized.
Exactly.
And don't try to come up here and say, well, you know what, you need to do certain things in your community. I mean, you have to be, like, let's just look at the President of the United States. Let's look at Barack Obama, and let's look at Donald Trump, right? Do you think that Barack Obama had a snowball's chance to be the President of the United States if he had the track record that Donald Trump had? Not at all. And if you say that to me, you're just looking at me and telling me a bold-faced lie.
Yeah.
They would have never let him get away with any of that, no matter what his political leanings were.
True.
Right? And so you have, and so basically you're talking about the one party that's always talking about people being held responsible, and always talking about morality, right? And then you have someone who are doing all these immoral things. Then the question is asked: how can you support one individual who has this history of doing things, whether you're talking about his family life, whether you're talking about the way he's conducted business, whether you're talking about the way that he deals with people. And then you got Barack Obama, who was a family man, who raised his children. He did everything the right way. And all you ever did was try to tear him down. And the only reason that you tried to tear him down was because of who he was.
Exactly. But see, it goes back to having that positive male imagery. When you have that positive male imagery, individuals have individuals that they can look to, and they can set that example in their head that, oh, I want to be like this person, and it's not nothing negative. And because I think because a lot of African American males don't have that leadership or that person as a positive figure that they can see in society that's coming across the TV screen or those images projected in the neighborhood, that they're left to, like I say, emulate what they see, what they normally see. And Barack Obama was up there. They were able to see that, okay, if he is able to get to this status or able to get to this level, then I too can get to this level. You know, even like if you remember when Tiger Woods and Venus and Serena Williams, they came out, how many people flocked to them little camps wanting to be like Tiger Woods, wanting to be like Venus Williams. They had this positive male and female imagery. You don't have it. You don't see it anymore. And it's just like these roadblocks that's put up. Like you said, you talked about an individual that you had represented not too long ago, a young man, you know, good student in school, you know, he had a good grade point average, but then he had one little mess up, and then they blow him off. But now once he comes out of that little hiccup that he have, he's probably not gonna go back down that positive road. You know, I was looking the other day at I don't know if anyone's seen the individual, the young man who actually took care of his son for 8 years. The mother went to jail back in 2010, and she had just came home just recently, within the last couple of weeks or so. And the courts, now he raised his kid to 8 years old, but the courts just granted full custody to the mother when she came home from prison. Tore it apart. If you see him on Facebook, he's sitting there and a social worker trying to pull a little boy out. The boy think, I don't want to leave my dad. Tore that family apart. You know, so these are the roadblocks. These are the things that happen, man. You know.
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, you know, it's kind of like, how do you change the hearts and the minds of a nation? You know, even listening to the attitudes of the individuals that I know are in a position of power, they don't even want you to even hear that type of voice. So even if you're in a position where you can help people, for example, in the criminal justice system, you have quite a few African Americans that are involved in the criminal justice system, whether you're talking about their judges, you're talking about attorneys, you're talking about individuals who are police officers. However, your ability to really make a difference is very limited because you're chilled in whatever you're doing. You know, I remember, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, a few shows ago, where there was this judge out of Missouri who pointed out that the DA was striking jurors based upon their race, and he ended up being suspended for 3 months for that. And I know personally attorneys who had judges. There's this thing in the criminal justice system called a Batson-Wheeler motion. Meaning that if someone is striking jurors based upon their gender or race or a protected class, then you can file a motion. And when you file the motion, you have to show that there's a race-neutral reason why you're striking these people, right? So I know of people, of judges, situations where I was told by friends who were attorneys that there were judges that would do those things to them. Now, listen, I'm telling you, there's judges that that did it to African American attorneys, right? And you aren't going to see that happening to them. You see what I'm saying? Those particular judges, because and like I said, and they can't really speak up or speak about it because there's an issue, oftentimes, with the whole idea of you know, the whole idea of race. You know what I mean? So and the whole idea of chilling the speech. You know, because you can't even criticize judges as an attorney. You know, that's an ethical violation. You know, and so you're in there trying to fight for justice, and there's even, you know, you might even be limited even on some of the cases that you can bring before the court. You know, I mean, it's you know. And so that's the reason why I say that oftentimes you put people in these positions, but they're limited on their abilities to make drastic changes, because once you're put into those positions, in order to stay in those positions, they're going to treat you just like the police sometimes treat people on the street. So they're often scared to even do anything because they're scrutinized in a way that other people aren't scrutinized. There's a tone in those, in the courts. And you hear people talking in the courts. Like, for example, when someone is charged with something, you don't really hear someone say he might be innocent. That's never part of the discussion.
Yeah.
There's this concerted effort to make sure that this person is convicted without even any discussion about the fact, even if there's evidence that may suggest that he might not be guilty. But I mean, again, going out, that kind of goes off on a tangent, but that still goes back to the whole issue of why fatherhood is so important, and why there should be an effort within the community to encourage and make it clear that, look, these young men need a positive father figure, and sometimes it may not necessarily be the person in your home. It could be the guy next door. You know what I mean? It's amazing how just doing what you're supposed to do will have a significant impact on other people. Like in my case, I mean, although I grew up, my mother raised me, there were a lot of, all the men that were around me were pretty much positive. So there was no question in my mind what I was supposed to do as a man. But that's just simply because I was put in that position. But, I mean, everybody's not that fortunate. And how do you deal with that?
True.
I think that I'm kind of left to wonder exactly, what can we do? I mean, we making this effort now. We speaking to it. And we hoping that other individuals will listen. Especially the young men that's out there right now that's not taking care of their children. Man, from one father to the next father, man, step up and take care of your own, man, because I think that's, for those who do have the ability, that don't have them roadblocks in their way, that they can take care of their kids. And even if it comes down to, lowering your pride, man, and just being able to try to work something out with the mother of your child, man, try to work it out, because at the end of the day, man, it's all on the child. The child is the one that's going to suffer the most, And for those who just don't, and this is just me, for those who just really don't want to take care of their children, I feel they're cowards. And that's just straight up calling it, like I said, they're cowards. Right. You don't want to take care of your children. You want your child to call somebody else daddy, then, you got a serious issue. Right. So, right. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. That's how I feel about it. Because I'd be damned if anybody gonna raise mine.
That's important. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the main thing that we have to make sure that we. And I don't know. I mean, I think that it's just just a call to action. I know that years ago we had the Million Man March. And talking about national movements about us getting our thing together as far as men, making sure that they're taking care of their responsibilities, they're taking care of their families, and making that seem to be a more attractive way of doing things. But that goes back to the fact that we've entered a time in society where there is no emphasis on the family. It's not cool to do those sort of things. So I mean, I remember it's just like there was a time where even in the situations of dating, when men dated women, even in high school, the whole idea was they wanted to marry them. You see what I mean? They thought that every girl they dated was going to be somebody they were going to marry. Nowadays, that's not even in the picture. They ain't even thinking about trying to marry somebody. That's not even, that's not even something that we don't even put a lot of importance on marriage anymore.
True.
We think that it's okay, and we encourage people, not to marry. And I think that that's sad. I think that we should go back to making family a much more important element, and stop, and I know it's okay. I mean, you're not supposed to, judge people, but I think that we need to begin to start focusing on making sure that that we show people that it is a more socially acceptable thing to actually take care of your children and take care of your family, and also in all aspects, even in entertainment and all the things that we do. I think that we've just got so loose and we're accepting anything. So, but anyway, man, I mean that's the end of it for us today, man. And again, I appreciate everyone listening in. And I'm to Justice Watch. I'm Attorney Zulu Ali with Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. Till next week at the same time, same place, and same channel. Stay blessed, and we'll see you next week.
Payback. That is. Payback.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
One in progress. I'm Jeff Nathanson. One baseball game happening right now. It's the bottom of the third inning. It's the Phillies 2 and the Nationals nothing in D.C. Bryce Hoskins has a home run in this game for Philadelphia, his 11th of the season. Bryce Harper, by the way, 0 for 1 with a strikeout today. Can you believe Bryce Harper is only hitting .211 right now, and it's June the 24th already? We're getting close to halfway. Trey Turner has a stolen base in this game for the Nationals. He's got 21 of those this season. Bit of a lost art, perhaps. That's a lot of stolen bases these days. Everything else is final in the big leagues today. Blue Jays beat the Angels 7-6. Marlins over the Rockies 8-5. Giants edged the Padres 3-2. Twins blanked the Rangers 2-0. Astros 11-3 over the Royals.